Welcome back to Storytime Recap. Today, I will talk about a science fiction thriller movie titled Sunshine. Without further ado, let's get started. By 2050, a new ice age is imminent due to the instability of the sun brought on by dark energy. Experts have concluded that the illness may be cleared out and the sun stabilized by using an experimental stellar weapon with a payload of the mass of Manhattan Island. The burdensome responsibility of transporting the cargo falls on the Icarus I, a prototype spacecraft equipped with cutting-edge heat protection and highly developed artificial intelligence. The expedition was unsuccessful. A second effort, with the Icarus II, is attempted 7 years later. The crew consists of Dr. Robert Capa, the physicist in charge of finalizing calculations for the deployment and detonation of the stellar payload, Captain Canida, the focused, determined mission leader, Mace, the engineer who brings a military perspective to the mission, Dr. Searle, the ship's counselor and medical officer, Cassie, the pilot, who acts as the crew's emotional tether, Trey, the tech-savvy navigator, and Harvey, the first officer. After 16 months at sea, the ship reaches the dead zone, an area of interfering solar radiation where radio transmissions to Earth become unreliable. 7 days sooner than intended, the spacecraft entered the dead zone, leaving the crew with only 24 hours to compile their final thoughts and send them to their loved ones in a final message. Without meaning to, Capa runs out the clock on Mace by trying multiple different ways to say the same thing. After a confrontation between Capa and Mace, the latter never fully apologized for his actions, and the two remained openly hostile towards one another. In the Earth room, which is meant to mimic Earth's sensuous environment, Searle makes Mace spend 2 hours. After that, Mace and Capa make up and are cordial to one another. Corazon points out at a crew meeting that the spacecraft is only 2/3 of the way to the sun, but it already has enough oxygen saved for the delivery and a quarter of the return trip since the garden has been producing oxygen at greater than predicted rates. Searle has gotten mesmerized by the sight of the sun rising outside the ship's viewport and wonders what it would be like to see the sun without the protection of the ship's glass. According to the AI, he can only take in 3.1% of the actual light, so Searle has Icarus set the system for 30 seconds at that rate. Searle seems to be affected in some way by the outcome, as he starts spending a lot of time in the viewing room and finally develops sunburns and peeling skin from overexposure. To find out what went wrong with the initial expedition and save his own crew from the same fate, Icarus II's captain, Canida, has been poring over Captain Pinbacker's video logs. He shows a clip in which Pinbacker talks about a little meteor storm that caused only cosmetic damage, and he can't help but wonder what could have caused Pinbacker's detached demeanor. Harvey detects a signal from Icarus I distress beacon as the ship nears Mercury. The iron in Mercury's mass amplifies the signal, making it audible despite its low strength. Captain Canida explains to the crew that some of the people on board the Icarus I may still be alive, and he initiates a discussion over whether or not the current mission should be amended to check on the Icarus I's distress beacon. Mace is unhappy with the decision to change their flight plan because delivering the bomb is an urgent priority. Although Dr. Searle concurs with Mace's assessment, he notes that redirecting to the Icarus may first allow for the addition of a second payload. Since Icarus bombs have never been created before, he reasons that they are completely speculative and that having two would be beneficial in case one failed to detonate. Eventually, Captain Canida puts an end to the argument by announcing that he will defer to Capa, the ship's nuclear physicist, for his opinion. That Capa must make such a choice causes him distress. He explains to the captain that he is unable to make a well-informed choice and that the best he can do is flip a coin. The question comes from Canida. So? When asked, heads or tails? Capa opted for heads, reasoning that having 2 opportunities left was preferable to having just one. The skipper confirms Capa's decision. The 2 Icarus ships will meet up. Trey lays out the route, double-checks it twice, and decides he's good to go. The Icarus II is now heading in the direction of Icarus I, thanks to Trey's course correction. Trey fails to account for readjusting the ship's heat shield, which is essential for keeping the crew safe from the sun's rays, in any of his several computations. After causing minor damage to the heat shield, Trey realizes his mistake when the computer declares an emergency. Only by going outside the ship and fixing the problem will the full amount of the damage be known. After refusing to allow the second-in-command to accompany him, Captain Kaneda asks for a volunteer to accompany him, and Mace volunteers Kappa, which is Mace's way of saying that the current events are a direct result of Kappa's decision to alter the original mission and that the volunteering is clearly made in anger and not by deciding if Kappa was the best man for the job. Kappa accepts the challenge, and Kaneda allows him to join him on the spacewalk. Cassie maneuvers the Icarus II so that it would give as much shade as possible for Captain Kaneda and Kappa as they make their way out to the ship's maintenance bay in EVA suits. She accomplishes this despite knowing that they'll need to rebuild the 2 communication towers to get back to Earth. As the communication towers continue to orbit the living quarters, they will eventually burn off their exposed tops as the sun moves across the sky. Consequently, Cassie unintentionally sets off another chain of events when the still revolving and burning ruins of the communications tower allow a beam of sunlight to deflect towards the center of the ship and onto the oxygen garden. The ship is able to contain an initial fire, but the blaze quickly spreads, endangering not only the garden but the entire vessel. Mace, quickly assessing the situation, realizes that the mission and ship will be lost unless drastic action is taken, so he orders the computer to release all the stored oxygen in the tanks, to provide such an enormous boost to the fire that it will literally blow itself out. However, he also knows that this will completely destroy the garden. After this happens, Icarus II AI takes over automatically to restore the heat shield over the crew's quarters because the mission is in danger if they aren't brought back inside soon, due to Cassie now protecting the 2 astronauts from being vaporized by mere direct exposure to the sun. Cassie recognizes this maneuver will kill the 2 spacewalkers and tries to override the AI's order, but it won't listen. A brief struggle for command ensues between Cassie and the AI, culminating in Cassie's use of an override command that requires confirmation from a second crew member. The mission, in Mace's opinion, is more important than losing Kaneda and Kappa, therefore he refuses when Cassie asks for his authorization number. When Cassie begs Harvey for permission, he gives it to her right away. Despite Cassie and Harvey's orders, Mace phones Captain Kaneda and pleads for his help, a move that will ultimately lead to his and Kappa's deaths. Kaneda agrees with Mace that the mission is more important than his and Kappa's lives, and the captain orders the AI to resume corrective shading and continue with the mission. Kaneda, realizing that the heat barrier protecting the 2 astronauts is failing, sends Kappa back to the ship while he repairs the remaining damage by himself. In response, Kappa complies, and shortly thereafter, Kaneda repairs the remaining damage before succumbing to sunlight. Without their oxygen garden, the astronauts have no choice but to attempt to intercept Icarus I. Trey continues to blame himself and is placed on suicide watch. Now Cyril, Kappa, Mace, and Harvey are boarding along with Icarus I to learn whether or not there is sufficient food, a thriving oxygen garden, and a manageable payload. However, the ship cannot move since the computer servers have been severely damaged. Disfigured Pinbacker recorded a video log in which he and his crew appear to have decided to abort the trip because they felt that the end of the world was in God's hands. After the filter is turned off, the crew members are found charred to death in the observation room. A comment is made on how individuals who view the burning crew members on Icarus I without the protection of Icarus II will meet the same fate. The airlock that joined the Icarus I and II inexplicably collapsed, causing the 2 spacecraft to separate while the crew was looking into it. Since Kappa is the only one who can deploy the payload, they locate a single EVA suit that will allow him to return to Icarus II. When Kaneda was killed, Kappa became the new captain, but Harvey objects to him receiving the suit. Holding onto Kappa as he is shot towards Icarus II, Harvey and Mace use the insulation of the spacecraft to hide while holding onto Kappa. Cyril stays to manually release the shafts. Kappa lets go of Harvey during the flight, and the latter floats off into space, where he is subsequently frozen. In the aftermath of the collision, his body disintegrates and burns as it departs the safety of the ship's heat shield. Mace gets frostbite, but he recovers quickly. Seeing that there will be no more protection from the light once Icarus II departs, Cyril goes into Icarus I's observation room to get ready for his certain demise. He meets the same fiery end as the crew of Icarus I. Corazon figures out how much oxygen they have and how much they require. She figures that out of the 5 of them, for can make it to the delivery point alive with the payload. After deciding to kill Trey, Mace rushes to do it but discovers Trey has killed himself instead. Mace angrily smears blood on Kappa's palm, blaming him for Trey's murder, and the two fight again, this time ending swiftly due to the lack of air on board. AI informs Kappa in the payload room that they will not have enough oxygen to keep everyone alive until they have successfully delivered the cargo. He claims that Corazon has done the calculations and that there is adequate oxygen for the entire crew of 4. The computer tells him there are a total of 5 persons on board, with the 5th currently located in the observation lounge. Quickly, Kappa makes his way to the viewing room, where he learns that Pinbacker is still alive. He's been severely burned all over and appears to be mad. He then follows Kappa through the ship after slicing a hole in his chest with the scalpel he had stolen. Finally, Kappa enters the EVA suit compartment and shuts the door behind him. When Pinbacker activates the safety feature, he locks Kappa inside. Pinbacker then does what he did on his own ship and drains the coolant from the computer servers. A single seedling is quickly emerging from the freshly burned soil in the oxygen garden, giving Corazon and the expedition hope of not only survival but even a return to Earth. Pinbacker murders her as she summons Kappa and Cassie to the room. Mace immerses himself in the coolant in order to repair the Icarus II's central processor. He loses a leg to the machinery, which causes him to bleed to death when he is trapped inside and the temperature drops below freezing. At the same time, Pinbacker is pursuing Cassie in the nuclear payload, where she has taken refuge towards the front of the ship. Mace and Kappa have a final conversation as Kappa lies dying in the EVA suit room. In agony from the coolant, Mace informs Kappa that he must personally detach the nuclear warhead from Icarus and fly it directly into the sun. Kappa uses an EVA suit to get out of the compartment by piercing the inner door with a welding torch and then opening the outer airlock door. Kappa gains entry after a lot of the ship's loose items, including Corazon's body, are thrown out. Having unhooked the cargo, he proceeds to the ship's entrance. Since Icarus II and the payload are now separated, Kappa must use the EVA suit's thruster to travel to the cargo ship. Just as he gets close, the payload's thrusters fire, destroying a chunk of Icarus II. As for the rest of the ship, it explodes and burns to ash. In order to manually control and burn the payload, Kappa enters it. Cassie is hiding there, and he confronts Pinbacker. They struggle with the crazy Pinbacker and manage to free themselves. Kappa succeeds in lighting the nuclear fuse, and as the sun's inferno engulfs him, he finds serenity in the knowledge that his death is imminent. Robert, Kappa's sister, is back on Earth with her kids, sitting in a snowy park and watching the final message he sent her. An indication that they were successful can be seen in the form of a sun that is brighter than usual breaking through the clouds over a frozen Sydney harbor. Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.